Hi everybody, I'm Maureen Corrigan. I'm the Nikki and Jamie Grant Distinguished Professor of the Practice in Literary Criticism at Georgetown. I'm also the longtime book critic for NPR's Fresh Air. I'm talking to you from my home study. It's a cozy but small room, and right now it is also serving as my recording studio. That closet that you see there is where I'm now recording my reviews for Fresh Air. I'm here to talk to you about some books you might want to reach for during this pandemic when we're all sequestered at home and so many of us are looking for something to read to take us out of ourselves. I'm also thinking a lot about my office at Georgetown, by the way, because that's where I do a lot of my work. And on the door of that office, I have a photograph of this American soldier from World War II, and he's reading a copy of Betty Smith's 1943 novel, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Smith's novel was part of an effort during World War II to get literature into the hands of soldiers and sailors overseas. And the effort resulted in over 1,000 books like this. They looked like this. They were called the Armed Services Editions, and they included everything: copies of Moby Dick, The Great Gatsby, Webster's Dictionary. And so kind of in honor of the Armed Services Editions and the incredible inclusiveness of that program, I wanted to try to recommend a menu of fiction and nonfiction that might appeal to you right now. My first recommendation is this book, one of my favorite novels of all time, Stuart Onan's Last Night at the Lobster. It's about a Red Lobster restaurant in New England that's closing and kind of the breakup of the community of restaurant workers that have been manning that restaurant. It's sharp, it's elegiac, it's an insider look at the restaurant industry, and especially right now, since we're hearing so much about how that industry has been affected by the pandemic, it's a perfect novel to read. Another strong recommendation, The Women in Black, which has just been reprinted. It's a 1995 novel by Madeline St. John about 4 women working in the dress department of a department store in Sydney, Australia. Again, another novel about work, but sharp, tart, so smart about kind of the psychology of getting along with coworkers who perhaps you don't like. So I strongly recommend it. Also very witty. And the third novel I want to recommend to you, also short, I seem to be gravitating towards short novels, is this American classic, Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams. It's a beautiful novel about the waning days of the American West as seen through the eyes of a migrant worker. Just one of our great American writers. If you're looking for nonfiction, and specifically for memoir, a memoir that came out last year that I really highly recommend is The Yellow House by Sarah M. Broom. Broom grew up in New Orleans, and she grew up in a house that her mother was able to buy in 1960. It was called the Yellow House by the family, a wooden, as she says, shotgun house in New Orleans, kind of that began to fall apart over the years, but was really the center of her family, and it was destroyed during Hurricane Katrina. Broom writes with sharp-eyed clarity about how unstable the foundations of that house were, both literally and economically, because of racism, because of how her family really had to struggle against forces larger than themselves. And it's really a vivid and powerful memoir about one American family. And then finally, for those of you who gravitate towards suspense, as I do, this novel just came out by Cara Black, 3 Hours in Paris. It's World War II suspense about an American female sharpshooter who is parachuted into Paris. Her mission is to try to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Of course, she fails. And the rest of the novel is about her attempt to get out of Paris, 2 steps ahead of the Gestapo. So that is a really powerful suspense novel that, I just couldn't put down as I was reading it. for 2 days. The last book I want to recommend to you is this nonfiction work by Colson Whitehead. It's called The Colossus of New York. I thought since I began this recommendation video by talking about Betty Smith's A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I would end with a book about New York. I'm a native New Yorker. I teach a course at Georgetown about the literature of New York City, and I have been obsessed throughout this pandemic with looking at photographs about New York, reading stories about New York, which has been especially battered by this pandemic that we all find ourselves in. Colson Whitehead, another one of our great American novelists and nonfiction writers. This is a work of nonfiction about New York, and he takes us through the subways, through the streets of Midtown, over to the harbor. He walks all over New York. So many of the great New York stories, of course, are books about walking, and I really strongly recommend The Colossus of New York if, like me, you're missing that feeling of being lost in a crowd. I hope instead you can be lost in a book. Take care, be safe, and perhaps we can get together at a later date and talk about some more books. Thank you.